Hey everybody, this is Lonnie Sweet from the Sweet Management Group, and you are either listening to or watching the Never Sell Ice to Eskimos podcast, where we talk to sales executives from the culinary, sports, general business, and entertainment worlds about their journey, about being a salesperson in this industry and what it took to get to where they are today. So whether you're listening in your earbuds, you're sitting in front of your computer, I appreciate you stopping by and hope you enjoy. All right. This is the Never Sell Ice to Eskimos podcast. Excuse me. My name is Lonnie Sweet of Sweet Management Group. Renie, I haven't told you yet. I'm changing the name of my company from the Connect Group to Sweet Management Group. I am excited today because I've got another old friend of mine. I say old just because we've known each other for a long time, dating back to, when I moved to New Jersey, Renie Anderson. Renie has been at the NFL for 16 years. She started when she was like 14, which is amazing. Right. She's now the Chief Revenue Officer and EVP of NFL Partnerships. She oversees all sponsorships, all partnerships for the NFL and for all media sales related to the NFL. She is a 2016 Wise Woman of the Year. She is a Sports Business Journal Hall of Famer. She's got all the frigging accolades. Renie, and I don't know if you remember this or not, when I was in college, Renie was working at the Arena Football League for Commissioner Baker. And for some reason,
I remember this.
I had like a hard-on for working for the Arena Football League. And so for some reason, I was in sports management. I would write letters because email wasn't a thing then, right? I would write letters and call and be like, hey, Renie, there was a couple other people working in the league. Like, I want to come work for you guys. And I want to go. I almost took an internship for the Florida Bobcats, right? I had accepted it. And my guidance counselor was like, listen, probably not a good idea. I got you a better one up at Wolf Associates. But I remember like pounding you guys, like, hey, I want to come work for you, can work for you. And obviously never worked out. But then when I went to work at SFX and we were just talking about sharing cubes, and like lo and behold, my cube back into the office was Renie and Commissioner Baker. And that's where we got this relationship going. I just remember thinking in my mind, like, it was such a small world. And then like those cubes, you've stayed in touch with a lot of these people. I've stayed in touch. It was so amazing the amount of talent that came out of that place. So I appreciate you. And you're crushing it, which is amazing.
Oh, well, that's so nice. I'm happy to be here. And it's funny, like those cubes, that's where it's like staying in touch with people is so important in our industry. And we were around, that was, I think, in 2000.
Yeah.
It was prior to 9/11. So it was in 2000.
Definitely prior to 9/11, yeah.
And we were in like Cube City, and you had, Arena Football had a cube, and indoor lacrosse, Major League Lacrosse.
Major League Lacrosse, yeah.
And we had all of these different agents that were working on a variety of things. I have a visual, like someone was had the women's national soccer team poster of when I think they won the Olympics, when Brandy Chastain had like
Josh Schwartz.
Yes, that's right. Had it right next to the cube in that space. And so, we were all in our early 20s at that point. And so now you fast forward a few years forward, and most of us are all still in the industry, clearly a little wiser and older and greater experience. Keeping relationships is so important along the way. So.
It really is. Let me ask you a question. Just want to dig into this, and you guys are in a different spot, right? The league, I think you guys asked everybody to come back into the office, right? We obviously went through a couple
early,
year period.
We've been coming back long before most people. Like, people are like, are you worried about getting COVID on the train? And I'm like, no, I'm worried about getting murdered on the train. So we've been here for
still
years.
What I find awesome about that is, like, I talk to a lot of kids and talk to a lot of people about like my journey when I was younger and yours. It's very different now, right? Like, we're talking about the people that we were around on a daily basis. We went to have lunch with, went to have drinks with. Like, all of my best relationships in the industry came from those times because we were in the pits together, right? Yeah. You don't really have that now, right? Or you guys might, but there are a lot of places that don't. Like, how do you make up for not having that?
I think one thing that's interesting, and that's a little bit like, you go, I don't know if you worked at an Arena Bowl with us, but like, you go work for 2 weeks on an event. It's like your family, right? It's instant. You're together. Sometimes you don't sleep, right? Because you're 24/7. And so here at the NFL, we do have an in-office culture. I mean, it's funny. I just got off a virtual call here in the office with people in the office, and everyone was in their office. One guy was out. So, but it's pretty wild because we are an in-office culture. I would say, so my scope is, I have sponsorship, consumer products, video gaming, blockchain business, legalized sports betting, media sales, and they're all very in partnership management. So people that kind of keep everybody connected.
Yeah.
They're all of those groups are somewhat different. Like the sponsorship group, they don't have anything really. They have to go work with all of the different departments here in the building in order to execute on the contracts of all of our sponsors. And so it's really important that they build those relationships with our football operations team if we're integrating the Microsoft Service Tablet or some of that technology, or with our community relations team if we're talking about nationwide and integrating into the Man of the Year program. And so that in-office relationship and kind of, building that trust, because frankly, a lot of it is, getting to know people, you have things in common. And then also the trust that you build with colleagues is so important. And so we have that here. And obviously for us, those moments of togetherness, the kickoff, the obvious of Super Bowl, the draft, we continue to evolve. Our teams have to be in lockstep, our event group, all those things. So it's been important. We've been back in the office. I think we were only virtual for maybe 3 to 6 months. We came back a lot earlier than everybody at a 2-day a day. There were no restaurants. Every restaurant around our office was closed. Every hotel has been closed. That they're slowly open. New York City's back now, but so we were back way before, and it's tough for people. Like people, that flexibility and stuff. And we still have we have some flexibility, but we always did. I mean, when you work in sports, you work on holidays and weekends. And it's not 9 to 5 like I work at a bank, and so there is that flexibility has always been there in the reality of it, but that in-office culture is super important.
Yeah. Let me ask you, because I think you might have taken a different path. Like, how did you always know you wanted to be in sales? Like when I first met you in Arena, you were not in sales at all.
No, I thought I wanted to be a writer. So I was like, I went to college to be a writer, and I moved to California to be a writer. And then I ended up, I had to pay rent. And so I needed money. And so I met Dave Baker. He needed an assistant. So when I met you, I had been his assistant for 2 years in California, working for Dave and doing a little bit of his personal stuff, like personal assistant, as well as office stuff, because there were like 8 people on the staff. So you kind of got the ability to do everything. Yep. So when we moved to the East Coast, it was like, there's a few of us that volunteered to move to the East Coast to start the East Coast office. And ended up, people dropped, they left. And I was supposed to learn about consumer products and supposed to learn about sponsorship sales. They hired this guy for president of properties, but he quit. He never came to the office out in that Metro Media building. And so that's where
I remember who that was.
Yeah. And then you remember Jeff Sofka, he helped me on, I took the consumer products business in-house because there was nobody else to do it. He was supposed to do it. I think we made like $100,000 that year. And I was like driving around the country, shaking down licensees and creating t-shirts, designing t-shirts. Like I didn't know what I was doing. And then they hired a year later, this guy, Glenn Harine. You probably know Glenn from the NHL. And that's when we moved out of that office and we got temporary space here in Manhattan. He was the president of properties at that time. And he thought, he said, your skill set would be better served in sponsorship sales. So I was like, okay, I'll try that. And so I did that there for another 6 years, like evolve, learn from him. We had a variety of people that we hired. That's where I met Lorenzo. When Lorenzo worked at SFX, Reno, he came over Arena Football and worked with us.
Tuck was there too, and Emily was there, right?
Yeah, Emily Nassitz came over and worked in our broadcast
my
group.
former roommate, by the way, if you don't remember.
Right, exactly, in Little Falls, New Jersey. Is that right?
It was me, Jim Tucker, and Emily in Cedar Grove, New Jersey.
Yeah. So I totally remember that. So we which was great. And so I kind of fell into it. I mean, I think when I was in college, I liked sports. I always liked sports. I did an internship at the sports department, but I didn't know these jobs existed. I didn't know that. I mean, working in sports at that time was like Jerry Maguire or being like Bob Costas on air. Like you didn't know that these roles were a thing. And now like you go to college and you can actually major in this job. Like
that's what I did, by the way. I majored in sports.
Which have been some people though, a very different path. They are very laser focused. They knew they wanted to be a leader in business of sport. I didn't really know that. And so I think I was always really good at telling stories. And I think I took that skill set and just adapted it into the sales. And then just the natural relationship, I'm relatively good at keeping up with people. And I think that kind of helped enhance kind of my sales arm. Funny enough, today I don't really do sales. We have a team. I oversee the sales group, But it is fun when you get in and then you start talking in a negotiation. If I'm involved, usually now it means there's a problem.
Right.
Or it's just to help things on the relationship side. But
Yeah.
But it's an interesting path, and I'm so blessed and happy to. It sounds silly, but I'm like so happy to be here. I had no idea. Like, I'm from Kentucky. My office is on Park Avenue. It's crazy.
Which is amazing.
I know.
How did that evolve, Renie? Like, how did you? I think about sales style a lot, right? I think about there's all different types of salespeople, right, in this world, right? And I know what I am. I used to be and still are very much an aggressive, hard sales guy, right? But I've learned to kind of shut my mouth a little bit more and listen a little bit more, and I've adapted. There's certain people that sit in a room, they don't say a damn word, right? Until the end, they crack a joke, they take you golfing, and they close a deal, right? There's some people that are more like, how did you find your sales style, and how did you kind of mature and grow into it?
Yeah, I think a little bit was, I knew that there's a picture of, like, the sales guy, like car salesman guy.
Right.
That's clearly not me. But I did know that if I have a goal and I have a job to do, and it's to go out and find a way, like, I'm a good problem solver. And so I always looked at it more of my problem today is I've got to go sell this thing. Not necessarily that it's a problem, it's an opportunity, but to look at it more of understanding what their goals are. I am a pretty good listener. Part of it is finding a middle ground and a solution, I think, is good. I'm probably not your normal salesperson in the sense of I'm aggressive and I can go after it, but I think sometimes the part of my style is you don't really know you're being sold something. And so I think that, but at the same time, I don't know if that's, I think, Neneo Asamoah runs our new business here, and he's just a cool professional. Like, he spends so much time on relationships, and that's so important because people buy things, especially nowadays, it has to really work, and they do it for different reasons. Sometimes it's because their CEO is a huge fan. That's sometimes the worst reason to ever do a deal. Other times it's like, sponsorship sales is so different than like media sales, where you have like 8 different broadcast partners they have to have your rights. In this space, if you're talking to a tire company or a beer company, they don't have to have you. They can go buy advertising. So you have to be really creative and figure out a reason and an influence of why it's a really good idea for them to spend millions and millions of dollars for you, and what the guarantee is that it's going to help them. And so I think that creative side of it, Neneo has that. He's great in working within the internal parts of the NFL here. But I think that's something that understanding that the influencing side of it is something that I'm relatively good at.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I guess as people, I don't know, they would tell you one way or the other.
I'm pretty sure they have. As I've gotten older, I've figured out, I've just come to realize that win-lose partnerships are the worst. Right? If you're selling something to somebody they don't want or they don't need, and they feel like they got taken advantage of, it's really a terrible spot to be in. And it's not a good, and by the way, it's not a good feeling to feel that way yourself, right? Like, if you feel like you got taken advantage of, or you paid too much, or there's got to be that sweet spot of, boy, I feel really good about that partnership. Maybe I gave up a little bit of something that I didn't want to give up, but so did they. And kind of being able to figure out that balance, I always felt as again, it's called never sell ice to Eskimos, right? And the reason is because why the hell would you sell ice to an Eskimo? They don't need it, right? Yeah. So being able to figure that out, I think, is always really important.
Well, that's where it's always interesting. Like, I think there's an assumption that people are just calling us all the time here at the NFL because they want to spend money with us. And look, there's some truth to that, in a sense that they want to be with the NFL, but we're not fielding a lot of calls. There's an expectation because there's a value to it. We don't do just any deal. And it can be intimidating to think about how much you need to spend in order to do that here. So it's a very interesting proposition that we have here, and it's really challenging. It's really fun. Yeah. So every day is a little bit different. So you kind of never know what's going to happen.
For sure. So I got sent you some questions before and some of these other things. I'm curious, like mistakes, right? I think that taking risk and mistakes is such a huge part, for me, it has been an important part of growth, right? You got a couple that stick out in your mind over your career that, like, man, I really royally screwed that up, and this is what I learned from it, and I'm happy that it happened in hindsight?
Well, there's one where it's more about, I think it's somewhat humbling, and it's not necessarily a mistake, but it was more the arrogance that I had that I would talk about. Right. So when the very first deal I did here at the NFL, was the Bridgestone Super Bowl halftime show. So it was when Bridgestone did the entitlement of the Super Bowl halftime show, it was like 2 years after the whole like Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake fiasco.
Right.
And it took about 18 months. Yep, also known as that. And so it took about 2 years. I had started, it was sort of the first thing that I was given as a task that was mine to sell. And it took about 2 years, 18 months to find someone that was a brand that was interested. And their goal at the time was to become the number one brand. They were number 3 at the time. And I negotiated the deal with Kern Egan, if you know Kern.
I know Kern, yeah.
And the funny thing is about the deal, we verbally agreed on the phone, but that day I was in the hospital having a baby, my daughter Callie, August 23rd, 2007. And he was like, we agreed verbally, and we both were kind of like, we didn't know what we were doing, like what's happening, we're kind of winging it. And it was sort of the biggest deal either of us had ever worked on. And he goes, okay, well, let's get the lawyers on the call like tomorrow. And I said, listen, man, I didn't tell you this, but I need 2 days. I'm in the hospital, I'm having a baby, I've been induced. I need you to give me 2 days. And he was like, what? And so he did. I had the baby. She's great. We call her she's the Bridgestone baby. But
I love that.
So we get the deal done, we can do the contracts. And so I was like, I felt like I was hot shit. And I'm like, I just closed this huge deal. Now I'm on maternity leave. So I thought, okay, well, I got to go to the office. One, I'm going to bring my baby because so everybody can see her. She's great. But 2, so everybody can give me high fives and tell me how awesome I am because I just closed this big ass insane deal at the National Football League.
Right.
So I walked down we were at 280 Park at the time, all the way in my stroller, all the way down, get into the office. People are like, oh, the baby's so cute. But nobody was talking about the deal. And I sort of had my feelings hurt. I'm kind of like, this should be a ticket tape parade for me here.
Right.
A bunch of assholes. Like I was so angry. But then I said to someone, I'm like, no congrats on the deal. They're like, well, we emailed you, like, what are you working on now? And it kind of hit me like, oh, I was hired to do deals. Like I actually am sitting here thinking I'm hot shit, but I just did my job. And by the way, I actually need to go do more of those in order to maintain and exceed expectations. Like it was I think because I was so enamored with how much money the deal was and how big the platform was, I forgot that and it was completely humbling of like, oh, that's my job. And it's been interesting now. I'm going into my 17th season now. It's like, and I remember early on, like I had one job to do and it was new business, and it wasn't just do one new deal. Like I had pretty significant other areas that I had to focus on. And so it was, and I don't think it was a mistake, but it was a very immature, it was a very immature moment that I was like, again, somewhat of the arrogance that I think a lot of people in sales can have, but realizing like, oh no, that's why we pay you. I think we expect you to do that. And then what else are you working on? I'm like, well, I'm on maternity leave. But it was funny because it was helpful to me. I had a guy on my team one time, and he was in the new business group, and he hasn't worked here for a long time. And we were doing reviews. And if there's a scale from 1 to 5, 5 means you're like exemplary, 4 is you're exceeding expectations, 3 is you're doing the job, and 2 means you're not doing the job, and 1 means you're out of here. He had given himself a 5, and I had given him a 2. And part of it was he had never sold a deal here, and which, by the way, is hard. His complaint, he was very frustrated with me, and he was like, but I was so close on all these deals. And I'm like, dude, Tom Brady doesn't talk about the deals or the Super Bowls he almost won, right? Like the almost deal isn't a deal. It's 0, And so I think that's an expectation. And sometimes you see that there's confidence and then there's arrogance, right?
Yes.
And so I think I initially, when I did that deal, I was arrogant. It wasn't confidence. And I think it really evolved. It was so humbling for me. It was a good lesson. And I talk to college kids about it all the time because what's your job? Well, your job is to do sales. Well, yeah, that's great. Celebrate it. Next day, move on. Like, and that's where it's important to remember that. And it's funny because mistakes have been where I've, maybe I have worked over the years. I'm very passionate. I can be I can be very hot as a relationship, or probably if there's going to be an argument, I typically will stand up and be ready to have the argument versus not. And I've really worked on that over the past, because I'm not curing cancer here. And so I think the reality of, and I don't, again, not saying those are mistakes. That's just, I'm not built any other way, but I think I've learned how to temper that and really think about how to balance my emotions. And that's true of anybody. If it's, the excitement, I mean, you kind of, someone was presented to owners recently, and afterwards there was a vote and it was positive. And the two guys, they did a high five in front of like all the owners. And I'm like, dude, you got to act like you've been there before. Like, be cool. And so I think there's a part of that professional growth of how you manage your temperament, all that. And that's been something that for me was really important. Because if you had talked to anybody 15 years ago, it's like, oh, red-faced Renie. I mean, she gets mad easy. She's like on it. And I don't like to make mistakes. Like, I like to prepare. And so I'm very intense. And so I think that intensity is still there, but I also think there's a bit of grace that goes along with it now.
How do you self-reflect? Like, that's such an interesting kind of thought process you just ran through about the evolution of you as first off, it's not just you as a salesperson, it's you as a human being, right? You raise two children, like life happens and you grow from life just by nature, right? But how do you self-reflect a lot? You spend a lot of time like reading kind of those types of books. Like, what is it that you're doing to kind of grow?
Well, I think there's a couple of things where professionally here for like employees, I've had every job. So I kind of know what it's like. And so it's where I feel like I can relate to everyone from the receptionist to the assistant, to the person that's doing new business, to also not knowing, like that whole idea, like everybody gets imposter syndrome, right? And it's like not unique to women or anyone, but I think I have felt all of those, still do sometimes. I think part of it is, for me, I mean, I listen to a lot of music, and so because I commute on the train, and so I do. Sometimes it's funny, like depends on the mood I'm in that morning. If it's like kick-ass music that's like either rock or rap, or if it's like coffee house, cool jazz, acoustic, or is it frankly like Christian music where it's like something you hear within the church, and it's like very like soothing, and like or yoga when you go to yoga class and it's like calm and chill. Like it kind of depends, and I think sometimes sets my mood for the day, because when you get to Manhattan there's like a rhythm here, and when I pop out of 48th Street from the train, and between 48th and 51st I kind of know what kind of day I'm going to have, and partly I'm based off of the music I'm listening to. So I don't know if that's necessarily self-reflection. I am somewhat thoughtful of, I replay things in my head a lot, discussions I had, things I could have said differently in important conversations if I didn't prepare, or if I said something that might have hurt someone's feelings, or I try to be thoughtful of the words I choose, and because words are impactful. And I think as a parent we learn that too, especially now that I have teenagers, and words matter. My oldest daughter plays softball, and she wants to play softball in college, and she's very intense. I don't know where she gets it, but she's high expectations. She loves the idea of being able to go to UCLA or Oklahoma, these major schools. And I said to her one day, I said, Callie, it's okay if you don't go to college and play softball. And it was like I slapped her in the face, and it was like, I can't believe you don't believe in me. And I realized the words, although simple, meant so much more to her than I even considered. And so I think being a parent, and then also being an executive, and like being thoughtful of the words. And so I know that's not necessarily self-reflection, but I do think about some of that as frankly it reflects on to other people and has an impact.
The fact that you just said red-faced Renie before means that you've spent, whether you realize it or not, a considerable amount of thought about what you used to be like, and that growth along the line. Literally,
well, it's like self-awareness. That's the whole thing, being self-aware. And sometimes like know what your strengths are, know what your weaknesses are. And this is a silly one. Like, I'm not good at math. I hate math. I'm in charge of money. And so I make sure that, and whenever I have like percentages kill me all the time, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I mean, tips are easy, just double it up. But like, I surround myself with people that are strong in areas where I'm weak. And then not just I don't use them. I want to make sure we lift them up because they get credit for those strengths. And so, and I've only learned that from, again, I'm only going to succeed in a certain place professionally if I'm surrounded by a strong team and making sure that they get that credit and we're all kind of working together. But if you're not self-aware, and that comes back to that story of, kind of being humbling, like if I'm not self-aware, then you walk into a room and think you're like hot shit. And in reality, that's just your job. And so I think that's something that I've learned over time, that self-awareness.
Yeah,
and I think part of it's funny. People always ask me about being a woman in sports. I never think of it. Maybe I've always been naive. When I was a kid, all my friends were guys when I was younger. Frankly, when I met you, I'm mostly men in that space. There are a few women, Christy Grady was there. It's like, but I always, more of my concern has always been that I'm Southern. And so I'm different. It's like, especially out there, it's like, there was no one Southern. I mean, it's either they're from New York, New Jersey, usually very few Connecticut people, or Boston. And it's like, oh my God, they're going to find out I'm Southern. Well, clearly, so I can't fix that. It is what it is. So
well, I also think it makes you who you are, right? I think that we all, and this is what I think for kids, sometimes you find your challenges and you use them as superpowers. You know what I mean? It's something that you can actually use as a tool to help you kind of fight a fight. Listen, Tom Brady, if he was drafted in the 2nd round, probably would not be the same guy. He was drafted in the 6th round. He used that as a chip on his shoulder. For everybody else, for the rest of his career, you find things that become your reasons. I have mine, right? The things that happened to me growing up, or things that I take with me that, kind of like, fuck you, I'm going to do it anyway. Despite
well, that's a little bit of that. And that's where, again, I think there are certain things in my career where maybe I don't think anyone ever told me I couldn't continue to grow. But I don't, and I also, again, somewhat being naive, I didn't know that, I would become an EVP at the National Football League. Like, I didn't even know what that was. I mean, it's crazy. But I think it's just interesting. Part of that, I think that being naive is kind of nice. Like, it's like, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I wasn't
head down mentality, right? I mean, isn't that what you were talking about, wins and celebrations, and I've gotten really bad over the years where I've actually had to pull myself back, where I don't celebrate wins. I used to not celebrate wins at all, right? You would do a deal and you move on. My business is much different than yours, meaning I do a lot of transactions. We don't have larger deals, they're kind of smaller. So I would just keep going. I have taken time over the years now. I'm a little bit better at whether it's a fist pump or celebrating something, and just like appreciating it for the moment and then moving on, because it is hard. It's hard to close deals.
I mean, it's totally hard, especially here, the internal is so much harder than the external. And I think it is important to take a moment for the team, because nobody knows how hard it is. And it's like, and so because I know that, it's important. I mean, I got my guys for Christmas one year, I got them all bells. They have these like bells. It's like, just ring the bell. Or we have a Nate Checketts used to work with me, and he gave me a Thor hammer one year, because sometimes they call me the hammer here. And so we donate the hammer. I've since the hammer has had a variety of other homes, but it's like, give someone the hammer for the day. Like, just, it feels good to have that moment and then to move on, because you also want that person, when they lead someday, you assume, right, there's a growth, that they're going to do that. Like, they pass it on, they celebrate those wins. And it's a bit of a grind sometimes. So if you can take it, it doesn't take that long. It costs nothing to celebrate it, unless you're going out for drinks, which is, by the way, that's always fun to do too.
Of course. So we're wrapping up. I know your day is busy. Give me one piece of information for kind of somebody getting into the industry, just getting into sales, kind of getting into their career or making a career shift. Like, what's the kind of one thing you always tell people?
I think the relationship piece is so important. When we have young interns start here, or entry-level positions, you cannot do your job successfully here, or probably anywhere, unless you have connections within the building and get to know people well. So an example here, if someone starts as an entry-level position in the sponsorship group, they will not be able to have any success here and get their job done if they don't know people in the event group, the legal department, finance. So I think that it's important to make sure you make those connections. But the other side of it is, like, if you can sell lemonade, you can sell orange juice. It's a business. And so I think really focus on the expertise within your business. So if you want to be a salesperson, like, we get a lot of resumes and from people that, that have experience in outside sales. I mean, sometimes that's unique. Outside meaning selling knives, selling other things.
Yep.
Get some experience with, internships are so important, to your point of like, how can you get in? It's hard because sometimes those aren't paid, but I think having some experience is really important. Virtually today, there's a lot of opportunities now with internships to observe and watch. And look, there's that on the sales side of it, there aren't that many jobs as it relates to property sales, right? Like ad sales, media sales, there's thousands of, ad executive jobs out there, and those really meld into a lot of the sports side. So that's an interesting opportunity where there's more scope in areas. But on the property side, there's not tons of jobs. Same with clubs. There's one head of sales and they have a couple others. I think what's unique is that it's also interesting on the ticketing sales side is a very different approach, but strategically thinking about some of those. So I know that it was sort of all over the place, but relationships are important, and networking, and because all you need to know is really know one person, and that helps you, maintain those relationships. And then just getting that experience and understanding, where you want to live. Because if you want to work in sports, just sports per se, like we've got HR people, we have accounting people, we have lawyers, we have, bankers, we have all kinds of different people. And then if you want to really work in the sales space, understand that it's not easy selling the National Football League. It's not easy selling the National Basketball Association. So it's understanding how you can evolve those skill sets to really stand out, because there aren't tons of positions within those spaces, but there's opportunities there to, once you get it, you want to take advantage of it and do the best you can.
You said relationships. We started this conversation off about us sitting in cubicles 22 years ago together. And I think that's a testament to you. Listen, I'm going to give myself credit. I stayed in touch with a lot of people over the years. And I do think that relationship part is so critical. Like being able to have a real conversation in real life with people and seeking to understand them and being able to understand them is really important.
Well, I think, Lonnie, what I would say, and I kind of feel like this after COVID, I'm being really deliberate about where I'm spending my time and who I'm spending it with. And that's a little bit of those 2 years of COVID, I feel like a blur. And sometimes when I see my kids, I'm shocked at how old they are. I'm like, what happened? But I do think that more people are doing that. And look, virtually, it's so great because it's so much easier to connect with people. And I think that's great. But I'm so thankful that we have been able to stay in touch over the years. I'm so proud of you. You're doing such awesome stuff within your career, and it's exciting. And I know our companies have worked together, and I think, that kind of for both of us and a lot of those people that we worked with, the best is yet to come. I'm excited to see the next time, we connect, or even if you think the next, segment of years, where things go with all those guys in that space. I think it's good stuff.
It's fun. Well, Renie, thank you so much. I love this conversation. I appreciate you. I appreciate your friendship, and hope you have an awesome rest of the week, rest of the summer. Get to spend time with those kids. And listen, I'm a massive fan of the National Football League. I am. It's July 20th, so I think that probably training camp opens up between 7 and 9 days from now.
Yeah, kickoff is in 50 days.
Which I cannot wait for. I'm fired up that the football season is here.
Buffalo Bills at Los Angeles Rams.
I love it. And I'm fired up that you're doing so well. So thank you again. I appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Have a great one.
Thanks.
And the light didn't go off, by the way, at all, which is nice.
Oh, I know, right? Enough movement. All right, cool.
All right, Renie. Thanks,
Lonnie. Bye.
Bye.